Shut up, fool!
Stop listening to atheist YouTubers.
Hey, man! This makes sense!
Yeah, that's really bad. That's really, really bad. To me, this was flagrant.
Why did you cut off Frank Turek? What's wrong with you? Have some respect for your elders. I thought this would be an interesting exercise. Many theists will say William Lane Craig has never lost a debate, and that except for maybe one or two, and one of them is against a guy named Shelly Kagan, who is a philosopher type from Yale, PhD, teacher, professor, and instructor, whatever you want to call it, on the topic of, what was it? Is God necessary for morality? Hitchens is known as probably one of the best out there in terms of rhetoric, in terms of wit, humor, slow pan, straight man type of humor. So I thought it'd be fun to pit them against each other and use William Lane Craig as the control, because they both, in these two videos, will debate William Lane Craig. But here's the problem. The problem is they're on different topics. One topic is, does God exist? The other topic is God necessary for morality? What we're going to do is I'm going to play the question and answer period where Hitchens asks Craig questions. And it's, I think, 6 minutes long, 10 minutes long, in there somewhere. And then I'm going to play the clip where Kagan, the philosopher guy, who's an atheist, I believe, asks Craig questions. Kagan asking Craig. And then we're going to vote. And we're going to vote atheist Hitchens, atheist Kagan, theist Hitchens, theist Kagan. I'm very curious to see what you guys think. And then we're going to reverse it and see how these atheist guys do when they're asked the questions. So I'll probably play Kagan first answering questions from Craig, and then Hitchens answering questions from Craig, and then we'll vote again. And then I'll give you my thoughts, and then at the end of it all, if people want to call in and give their thoughts and talk, that's fine too. My guess is, well, yeah, it's open to both atheists and theists to call in afterwards, and we could talk about it. Because the reason why I thought this would be interesting to do is, imagine you're talking to a religious person if you're an atheist, or imagine you're an atheist and you're asking questions of religious people. What's the best method to use? What's the most effective way to be persuasive and most likely to be heard? So when you vote later, you're going to be voting on effectiveness, persuasiveness, even just the willingness to listen. Are you better to keep it more common sense, more lighthearted, more direct and to the point? Or are you better off going into more nuanced things and more specific on one certain detail? My guess is, both can work, of course, but I'm curious to know how you would vote for you personally and what you think is the most effective. Okay, so here we go. We're going to start with Hitchens first, asking Craig. Make sure everything's right.
Well, I'd like to know first, you said that the career of Jesus of Nazareth involved a ministry of miracles and exorcisms. when you say exorcism, do you mean that you believe in devils too?
What I meant there was that most historians agree that Jesus of Nazareth practiced miracle working and he practiced exorcisms. I'm not committing myself, nor are historians committing themselves to the reality of demons, but they are saying that Jesus did practice exorcism and he practiced healing.
So you believe that Jesus of Nazareth caused devils to leave the body of a madman and go into a flock of pigs that hurled themselves down the Gadarene slopes into the sea?
Do I believe that's historical? Yes.
Right. That would be sorcery, wouldn't it, though?
No, it would be an illustration of Jesus' ability to command even the forces of darkness, and therefore an illustration of the sort of divine authority that he was able to command and exercise. This, as I say, is illustrative of this unprecedented sense of divine authority that Jesus of Nazareth had, that he even could command the forces of darkness and that they would obey. So whether you think he was a genuine exorcist or that he merely believed himself to be an exorcist, what is historically undeniable is that he had this radical sense of divine authority, which he expressed by miracle working and exorcisms.
Right. And you believe he was born of a virgin?
Yes, I believe that as a Christian. I couldn't claim to prove that historically. That's not part of my case tonight. But I as a Christian, I believe that.
And I know you believe in the resurrection, but
yes, and for that I think that we have good evidence.
As a matter of biblical, what shall we call it, consistency, it's said in one of the Gospels that at the time of the crucifixion, all the graves of Jerusalem were opened, and all the tenants of the graves walked the streets and greeted their old friends. It makes the resurrection sound rather a commonplace in the greater Jerusalem area.
That's in the Gospel of Matthew, and that's actually attached to a crucifixion narrative.
That's what I said. It says at the time of the crucifixion.
Yes, that's right. At the time of the crucifixion, it says that there were appearances of Old Testament saints in Jerusalem at the time. This is part of Matthew's description of the crucifixion scene.
I mean, do you believe that?
I don't know whether Matthew intends this to be apocalyptic imagery or whether he means this to be taken literally. I've not studied it in any depth, and I'm open-minded about it. I'm willing to be convinced one way or the other.
You see, the reason I'm pressing you is this because, we know from Scripture that the Pharaoh's magicians could produce miracles. In the end, Aaron could outproduce them. But what I'm suggesting to you is even if the laws of nature can be suspended and great miracles can be performed, it doesn't prove the truth of the doctrine of the person who's performing them. Or would you not agree to that?
Not necessarily. I think that's right.
So somebody could be casting out devils from pigs, and that wouldn't prove he was the Son of God.
I think that's right. In fact, there were Jewish exorcists. The only point that I was trying to make there was that this was illustrative of the kind of divine authority that Jesus claimed, especially since he didn't cast them out in God's name, or he didn't perform miracles by praying to God. He would do them in his own authority. So that Jesus exercised an authority that was simply unheard of at that time, and for which he was eventually crucified because it was thought to be blasphemous.
Well, it was thought to be blasphemous to claim to be the Messiah, to be exact. The people who got the closest look at him, the Jewish Sanhedrin, thought that his claims were not genuine. So remember, if you're resting anything on eyewitnesses, the ones who we definitely know were there thought he was bogus. But okay, I think I've got a rough idea, assuming you make that assumption of his pre-existing divinity, that it's a presuppositionalist case, I can see what you're driving at.
Well, no, I've got another
question for you, which is this. How many religions in the world do you believe to be false?
I don't know how many religions in the world there are, so I can't
could you name... Right. Fair enough. I'll see if I can't narrow that down. That was a clumsily asked question, I admit. Do you regard any of the world's religions to be false?
Excuse me?
Do you regard any of the world's religions to be false preaching?
Yes, I think, certainly.
Would you name one then?
Islam.
That's quite a lot.
Pardon me?
That's quite a lot.
Yes.
Do you think it's moral to preach false religion?
No.
So religion is responsible for quite a lot of wickedness in the world right there.
Certainly.
Right.
I'd be happy to concede that. I would agree with that.
So if I was a baby being born in Saudi Arabia today, would you rather I was me or a Wahhabi Muslim?
Would I be? Would you rather be what?
Would you rather it was me it was an atheist baby or a Wahhabi baby.
I don't have any preference as to whether you would.
Very good. As bad as that. Okay. I've only got a few seconds. It's a serious question. I shouldn't squander it. Are there any Christian denominations you regard as false?
Certainly.
Could I know what they are?
Well, I'm not a Calvinist, for example. I think that certain tenets of Reformed theology are incorrect. I would be more in the Wesleyan camp myself. But these are differences among brethren. These are not differences on which we need to put one another in some sort of a cage. So within the Christian camp, there's a large diversity of perspectives. I'm sure there are views that I hold that are probably false. But I'm trying my best to get my theology straight, trying to do the best job, but I think all of us would recognize that none of us agree on every point of Christian doctrine, on every dot and tittle.
Before Mr. Hitchens succeeds in launching another series of religious wars among Christians, let's get to the responses. 7.
Okay, so that was Hitchens asking Craig questions. Now, remember, if you came late, this is a debate between, or a competition, I should say, between Hitchens and Kagan. So I'm going to play Kagan now, asking questions of William Lane Craig. Different topic, though. It's on the is God necessary for morality? And then we're going to vote on who's the better questioner as far as being effective and persuasive in what they're trying to accomplish. Let's bring that up. Here we go.
So one of the things that you said in your opening remarks, well, you quoted several people. I think there was a long quote from Michael Roos saying something like, if naturalism is true, if theism is false, then ethics is illusory, deeper meaning is illusory. That's not an exact quote, but I think those phrases were there. And I found that an interesting slide, or so it seemed to me. The move from ethics is illusory to deeper meaning is illusory. I think I want to concede that in the way you mean deeper meaning, I don't believe in deeper meaning. Because I think when you talk that way, you think for there to, not that I have any trouble talking about meaning or even deep meaning, but when you talk that way, I think you're thinking it's got to be meaning on a cosmic scale. That's where some of the points about accountability come in as well.
Yes.
So, fine, I believe that humans are just creatures that evolved on this tiny little speck of dust. But I don't see how the denial of deeper meaning should give me any reason to think, therefore I'm committed to ethics as illusory. So perhaps you could explain that.
Where that came in, I think, was with respect to moral accountability. And also with regard to the significance of human beings. It seemed to me that on a naturalistic worldview, everything is ultimately destined to destruction in the heat death of the universe. As the universe expands, it grows colder and colder as its energy is used up. And eventually all the stars will burn out, all matter will collapse into dead stars and black holes. There will be no life, no heat, no light, only the corpses of dead stars and galaxies expanding into endless darkness. And in light of that end, it's hard for me to understand how our moral choices have any sort of significance. There's no moral accountability. The universe is neither better nor worse for what we do. That ultimately there isn't, our moral lives become vacuous because they don't have that kind of cosmic significance.
I still need to have you explain that for me better, because again, it seems to me it's one thing to say it lacks eternal cosmic, everlasting significance. It's another thing to say it lacks significance. In fact, to give one of your examples, you talked about, again, I don't remember the source of this quote, but the torturers, was it Nazi torturers?
Right, yeah.
And you say, you know, if theism isn't true, then it doesn't really matter. This strikes me as, I'm sorry, I'm sure it's going to sound rude, but it strikes me as an outrageous thing to suggest. It doesn't really matter? Surely it matters to the torture victims whether they're being tortured. It doesn't require that this makes some cosmic difference to the eternal significance of the universe for it to matter whether a human being is tortured. It matters to them. It matters to their family. It matters to us. So again, how do you move from the lack of eternal significance to the thought that if it doesn't have eternal significance, it can't have any significance?
Because the victim, it obviously matters to him in the sense that he's in pain and agony, but ultimately it doesn't matter that he was ever in pain and in agony. The whole thing just degenerates into utter meaninglessness and insignificance. I don't mean to suggest that the torture didn't do a bad thing to this person, but ultimately it doesn't matter. It all ends up the same.
Yes, but it all ending up the same isn't the same thing as, and so it doesn't matter what happens until we get there. And when I say, and it matters what the path is before we get to the end point, I don't merely mean subjectively it matters, it appears to matter, it matters to them, but it doesn't really matter.
Well, and that's what it seems to me. It just matters subjectively.
But again, I just want to say, I don't understand how we get from, if it doesn't objectively matter to the universe, or doesn't objectively matter on a cosmic scale, how do we get from that to so it doesn't objectively matter at all?
Well, remember...
So it's not a point about the nature of objective. It's the question is, why should we think objective value must be on the cosmic scale or not there at all?
Now, let's remember the argument. This concern arose in the third point about moral accountability. This wasn't in the first 2 points about objective moral values and duties. What I said was, with regard to the third point, even if objective moral values and duties exist, they become irrelevant because they're inconsequential. So my third point about moral accountability was simply to say, on atheism, even if there are objective right and wrong and good and evil, there's no moral accountability, and so one might as well just live as he pleases. And
might as well. If by might as well means there's no reason to live one way versus the other unless it makes a difference on the cosmic scale, it just seems to me that the same questions being, to my ears, begged yet again. It matters perfectly. There is an objective, categorical reason, not a matter of opinion. There's a fact of the matter about the compelling, overriding reason that you are irrational to disregard, even though, in terms of the heat death of the universe, it won't stop it. But for all that, there's an objective reason not to behave this way.
Yeah, that would be to say you have an objective moral duty. And for the third point, I was willing to grant that. But the question here is the deeper question about why adopt the moral point of view. And that can't be a moral answer because you're asking the question, why adopt the moral point of view? I think the concern that I have in this third point is that on
What's the answer that you believe you got to give us a theist?
Let me explain. I think on the third point, that what I'm trying to say there is that on atheism or naturalism, that prudential value and moral value are on a collision course with each other. That what it's prudent for me to do is often in contrast or in conflict with what's moral for me to do. And prudence would seem to trump morality in terms of one's self-interest in virtue of the fact that it makes no difference how you choose. But on theism, where there is moral accountability, you can consistently make choices that go against your self-interest and sacrifice self-interest and prudence for the sake of the moral value and moral duty.
Because precisely you'll get it back in the end, and so it's not really in the long term a self-sacrifice at all. That's the thought, yes?
Well, that wasn't what that wouldn't be the way I'd put it. It's not that...
But that is the reason that you think you can resolve the conflict between prudence and and morality, because God makes it be the case that unless you act morally, your self-interest won't actually be furthered. That's how the solution is.
Yes, that's right. That they'll be in harmony with each other ultimately.
So you're completely right. I don't believe they're in harmony.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean I believe the only rational thing to do is to act prudently. On the contrary, I believe there's greater reason. I'm sorry, this should be a form of a question, like Jeopardy. Put this in a form of question, Shelly. Why not believe that moral reasons outweigh prudential reasons? The mere fact that there's a conflict doesn't commit the naturalist to the claim that the prudential ones are the weightier ones.
All right, but there is that conflict, and for many people, I think, as I said, this can have a demoralizing effect upon a person because ultimately his moral choices make no difference either for himself or for the good of the universe. And I suspect that this will be demoralizing in the way that Adams suggested it would.
No doubt for some people it will be, but of course for some people there's a different kind of demoralizing that takes place with the belief in theism, isn't there? I mean, if we're just going to talk about what are some possible psychological effects, some people will act morally not out of the recognition of the objective values, but merely in hopes of getting into heaven and avoiding hell. There's something morally off about that as well. And
I agree.
so both sides face certain empirical questions about, certain people may misread the implications of the view. That strikes me as a standoff at best.
I don't know. I'm not sure that the person who acts in self-interest has misread the implications of the atheistic worldview.
That's because you've yet again assumed that if we're naturalists, we must assume that prudence, either there are no moral reasons at all, or if there are, they're inferior in strength to prudential reasons. That doesn't seem to me to follow from naturalism at all. If we had more time, obviously we can only begin to scratch the surface of this debate. If we had more time, I'd lay upon you my elaborate theory of the nature of practical reasoning, according to which prudential reasons are less significant than moral reasons. Well, this is a view that I think is completely compatible with naturalism.
Perhaps we can get it.
Little imaginary dictator, I suppose, has acted wrongly.
Okay, I think that was it. Is that it?
And as such deserves punishment. So how can we justify the punishment? In terms of the rules of the social contract. What do we do? We agree in the contract that if people break the contract, they'll be subject to penalty.
What if he doesn't want to sign the contract?
So look,
he's outside the contract, so he's not bound by it.
Well, the question is not what does any given person in fact agree to. That's why I talked about what we would agree to insofar as we're imagining ourselves as being perfectly rational. As a perfectly rational being, that is to say, if you imagined a kind of souped up, cleaned up version of the dictator, it would be just as reasonable for him to sign the contract as for the rest of us. It's neither here nor there that he doesn't accept morality. He's still bound by it. We're all bound by it precisely because it would be reasonable for all of us to agree to its terms.
Okay, that's the end. Okay, so this is what we're going to do. Let's get rid of this. We're going to vote. So this is what you're voting on. If you came late, you're not voting who won the debate between Kagan and Craig. You're not voting who won the debate between Hitchens and Craig. You're voting who did better as an atheist, Hitchens or Kagan. Now, how do we define who did better? We're defining who did better in this case as who's more persuasive, who's more effective in communicating their ideas or getting their points across or having some type of impact on the audience listening. And who's the audience? Because you're probably going to have different audiences for this debate compared to the other debate with Hitchens. There are at most, 1,000 people who watch these debates live, and there's 337,000 views on the Kagan debate, and there's 6.8 million views on the Hitchens versus Craig debate. So basically, who's the audience? People who click on the video. Sometimes just at random, you got some interest, and they start watching. So who did better? And then we're going to separate between atheists and theists. So if you're an atheist, you're going to say either Hitchens or Kagan. And if you're a theist, you're going to say either Hitchens or Kagan. And I know there's probably not too many theists in here yet. So you're, in either case, you're voting for an atheist. If you're a theist, hopefully you have some humility and grace that you're willing to make a positive vote for an atheist, even though we're all going to hell. Okay, I think that's right? Who did better? I defined what better means, and define the audience, define that, ask your community. Oh no, no theists in here. Come on, theists. You watch both debates. Whoa, we got a barn burner here. Let me make this bigger. Whoa, tight race. Why is it weird? Sapir Ode. This is a competition between Kagan and Hitchens. It's more obvious that Craig is special pleading under Hitchens. I think Kagan did a good job addressing the social contract. Kagan was a bit more acerbic and testy? Really? Okay. Getting laughs from the audience there was powerful. I'm here, but I didn't hear the Hitchens part. Well, you probably heard it, but just not today. It's if you came late and you're a theist, you're comparing this debate with the debate where Hitchens asked Craig questions like, do you really believe in the virgin birth? Do you really believe Jesus cast out demons out of a man and they went into pigs? Remember that one? So who do you think was better, Kagan or Hitchens, in terms of being persuasive, likable? The theists would be more likely to listen to them, understand them, get their points, both intellectually and emotionally. You got to weigh everything. Yeah, I'm not asking you who you like more, but who's more effective in the question and answer period. And we're going to do this again. This first part was the atheist asking Craig questions. And it's pretty easy to ask questions. It's harder to answer them. So in the next phase, we're going to see how Hitchens and Kagan do when they're asked the questions. And then we're going to vote again. Try to separate your love for one man. Try to be objective. Unbiased, I should say. View this in terms of how effective do you think these atheists are in persuading theists? Maybe not convincing them to become atheists, but just, hey, this atheist made some good points. Hey, I like this atheist. Not you, but the theist listening. And if you're a theist, then you can speak for yourself. Oh, he did convince me here. He is very likable. He did persuade me. Oh, okay, we're getting some more votes in here from the theists, which is good. Don't be too discouraged by the small, because the percentages are cumulative over 4, but you can still get a relative sense, right? Let's see if we can get up to 100 votes. Just 10 more. Come on, vote. Kagan the philosopher or Hitchens the how do you say that word? Rhetorical man. He's more than just a rhetorical man, though. He actually knows a lot of stuff. Reads a lot. Has traveled the world. I bet you Hitchens has seen more of the world than Kagan. That's my guess. I've wondered if William Lane Craig has refused to debate Jeff Lauder after seeing the Rhetoric debate. What has Hitch admitted? Oh, that was poorly worded. Yeah. That's a good rhetorical thing to do. Admit that. Kagan actually challenged the worldview of the theist. That's a very tough question. If I knew what would be effective to the other side, there wouldn't be another side. That's not true. What's effective for some theists is not effective for others, but I'm just asking you overall, where do you put the edge? I would love to hear Hitchens' take on society right now. You can, Franklin. You can hear Hitchens' view on society right now. All you have to do is go to the PineCreek political channel. Poll is rigged. Can we get to 100 votes? There's way more than 100 people in here. If you haven't voted yet, vote. Hitchens and Fry together were one of the best displays ever seen. Yeah, I remember that one. That was pretty good. Lecterns versus armchairs, different tone. Well, they were both in one they're behind a table, the other one they're sitting more casually. I'll give you that. One, the audio and video quality is way better than the other. Actually, okay, so we're almost at 100. Who did we start with? We started with Hitchens asking. So let's start with Kagan asking the questions, or answering questions. Get that queued up. William Lane Craig asking Shelly Kagan questions. And then we're going to listen to William Lane Craig asking Hitchens questions soon. Okay, so that's queued up. Okay, we got over 100 votes. Thank you so much for voting. Final results. This audience at least thinks Hitchens is slightly, well, actually not slightly, but is more effective than Kagan. And among the theists think Kagan is more effective than Hitchens. Granted that there's different topics, but we're talking about persuasiveness to the audience listening. Okay, my personal opinion, I didn't vote because I can't vote on my own polls. If you're thinking about who's watching these and knowing that millions of people are watching on social media and very few people in the audience, you got to, I think, appeal to the lowest common denominator. And I think Hitchens does that better. Let's be honest. For all you theists out there who think, well, you got to address the strongest arguments for theism, and Hitchens doesn't even come close. He's a pop atheist. He's a new atheist, blah, 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 right? That's what the typical rhetoric back at Hitchens is. But the bottom line is, most people don't care about philosophy. They don't care. Most people probably didn't even understand half the things Kagan just said, or Craig said, when they're talking about the social contract and the objective morality versus, and the free will versus determinism and compatibilism and all that. They go, what? But the average Joe on the streets can say, hey, I like that Hitch guy. He made me laugh. You know, he's going to hell and he's wrong, but hey, he's likable. He's witty. I like that. So I agree with the poll results that Hitchens is more effective than Kagan. And if you disagree, odds are you took at least 6 credit hours of philosophy in university, and that's why you disagree. And my guess is the theists listening right now have taken 6 credit hours, maybe not of philosophy, but of theology. And so that's maybe why you like Kagan better than Hitchens. But let's see how these atheists can answer questions. That's a little more difficult. So we said we would start with Shelly first. Here we go.
Well, obviously, a number of questions came up in my talk that would be pertinent to what you shared, Shelly. In your opening address, you said right or wrong depends upon the whether you hurt other people without justification. And when asked, are these really wrong, you answered yes. Why? Because it harms the victim. Now, I guess my difficulty is that I certainly agree that it's wrong to harm people, obviously. But it's hard for me to understand on a naturalistic worldview, such as I described, why on the worldview of naturalism, inflicting harm upon other members of our species is really wrong. It seems to me that this happens all the time among other animals, and so why is it wrong peculiarly for human beings to inflict harm on each other?
All right, so let's start with that. Suppose that my 3-year-old nephew walks into your house, takes some book off your shelf, and tears the pages out. He hasn't done anything wrong, or 3-year-old's probably old enough he has done something wrong. Make him a year and a half, he hasn't done anything wrong. If I go into your house, tear some pages out of your book, I've done something wrong. What's the difference? Well, I'm capable of appreciating reasons for respecting your property that my 1.5-year-old, this is hypothetical 1.5-year-old nephew, doesn't have the capacity, right? There are differences between people that allow me and you to think about our behaviors, to evaluate our behaviors, to see whether or not there are legitimate reasons for behaving as we do. Creatures that don't have that capacity don't have that capacity. It's precisely because they lack that capacity that makes no sense that the notion of right and wrong behavior gets no purchase. Lions can't reflect upon their behavior, so when they do it, it's not wrong. If you or I were to engage in that behavior, we can reflect upon that. We can recognize the reasons for not behaving that way. So I think the distinction is a fairly straightforward one, not a deep mystery or a hard challenge for the naturalist to respond to.
Okay, I think that's a good answer for why we wouldn't regard animals as moral agents who would be culpable for their acts. But it seems to me that at best that answer would go to show that rationality, or the ability to reflect rationally on things, is a necessary condition for moral behavior, but I don't see that that's a sufficient condition for moral behavior. It's still not clear to me why it would be wrong for creatures who have considerably complex neurological systems to inflict harm on each other on a naturalistic worldview in the struggle for survival.
Okay, so the question you asked initially was, how can I explain why it's wrong for me to murder when it's not wrong for lions to murder? And to answer that question, all it takes is for me to point out a relevant difference between us, and you've just, I think, said, yeah, all right, so I managed to do that. If we now shift to the question, so what does it take for wrongness to enter the world above and beyond rationality? I think the answer might well be, actually, once we achieve a certain level of rationality, nothing more is taken. Nothing more is needed. The reason it's objectively wrong for me to engage in murder is precisely because there is a reason for me not to do it. A reason that I'm capable of recognizing. And if you ask, well, what more does it take? The answer is, well, those are the basic ingredients right there. We can refine it. I mean, we can put a little icing on it if we'd like to make it. But in terms of the essentials, that's it. What there's reason for me to do depends on what kind of creature I am. Once I become the kind of creature in the evolutionary, process, once creatures evolve that are capable of stepping back from their actions, capable of reflecting about whether or not their behavior makes sense, whether it conforms to standards that they are themselves prepared to endorse, at that point the machinery is in place. And at that point there are reasons for me to behave in certain ways and to avoid other kinds of behavior. And if you ask, but what makes that wrong?
I'm still not clear as to why these beings suddenly achieve intrinsic moral worth in virtue of having these complex nervous systems that enables them to have self-reflection and so forth.
If you put it as complex nervous systems, it sounds pretty deflationary.
Right.
What's so special about having a complex nervous system? But of course, that complex nervous system allows you to do calculus. It allows you to do astrophysics. It allows you to write poetry. It allows you to fall in love. Put under that description, you ask, what's so special about humans from a naturalistic perspective? I'm at a loss to know how to answer that question. If you don't see why we'd be special and different from everything else in creation, that because we can do poetry, we can write a novel, we can think philosophical thoughts, we can do calculus, and we can think about the morality of our behavior, I don't know what kind of answer could possibly satisfy you at that point.
Well, obviously, the kind of answer that I offered, but
can I ask just to follow up on that? Because I'm tempted to say I could play this game, and that's unfair, because of course it's not a game. But I could pose the same kinds of questions to you. Perhaps I will. In 10 minutes, I could say, look, all right. So God says, you guys are really, really special.
Right.
So, how does his saying it make us really special? But you see, he gave us a soul. How does our having a soul make us special? Whatever answer you give, you could always say, with regard to that, what's so special about that? At a certain point, you're just going to have to say, you know what? These features really do seem to me to be special. Insofar as it seems to me that our ability to communicate, to reflect, to love, to be creative, and consequently to shape our behavior with an eye towards how we're interacting with one another, these things strike me as remarkable ways in which we're special.
I think that they strike all of us that way, and that's the difficulty, perhaps, I think, in showing what I'm attempting to show, is that we all do, I think, intuitively value one another. We value persons. We value poetry, creativity, and all of these things. I think we all agree that these are goods. The question is, though, on a naturalistic view, why think that these things are goods? It seems to me that you emphasize in your own book, On the Limits of Morality, the importance of having explanations and not cutting off the search for explanations too soon. And I wonder if you're not cutting off the search for explanations too soon by simply saying, well, I'm just going to regard persons as intrinsically valuable, but without any kind of further grounding for that.
Well, of course, I haven't claimed there is no further grounding for that. I gave you a sketch of the contractarian thought. Your attitude was, I don't find that a very compelling story. It doesn't seem to me to be the kind of thing that constitutes an adequate grounding. I suppose these things are in the eyes of the beholder, and everybody here is entitled to decide for themselves what kind of answers will be satisfactory or not.
Let me ask you a different question then.
One more.
Okay. Are you a determinist?
Yes.
And yet you still think that love is significant and human choices are morally significant, even though they're determined?
So to give a piece of jargon to the audience that Bill will be familiar with, I'm a compatibilist. That is to say, I believe that one can combine determinism and free will. So absent free will, humans would lack the significance that we clearly have. But I believe that's compatible with determinism. Actually, am I a determinist? Who knows what quantum mechanics teaches us about whether or not determinism is true. But at least I believe that determinism could be true without in any way threatening my conviction that humans are special.
Did you have a follow-up on that one?
Well,
I think you did.
Only to say that it just seems to me to rob moral choices of any sort of significance if we're determined to do it by the antecedent physical causes that lead up to the point of choosing and then cause our brains to react one way rather than another. I can't see how that could have any more moral significance than a tree growing a branch at a certain point in its development.
Because you're an incompatibilist. You don't believe determinism and free will. So this is a debate for another night. I mean, it's not that I think the truth of compatibilism is at all self-evident.
Can you just explain what that term means?
Compatibilism is the view that there's no logical inconsistency between belief in determinism on the one hand, and the existence of free will on the other. They're compatible.
Well, that's a little bit misleading, though. I mean, you need to explain what you mean by free will in that case, if everything's determined.
What I was trying to do is simply give a quick definition. Remember, I said that this is a very, as you know, it's a very, very complicated question. We would basically hijack the entire rest of the evening to start trying to...
I'm unclear on the terms myself.
Right. So my thought was just that the plausibility of the compatibilist view that I hold, I don't take to be self-evident. I believe it takes philosophical argumentation for it. I completely agree that those drawn to incompatibilism, those drawn to the view that you can't have both deterministic physical laws and robust free will think if naturalism is true and the best science teaches us that determinism is true, itself a controversial question whether that's the best interpretation of our best science, then we'll lack free will. And then if free will is necessary for having special value, then we'll lack special value. But there's a lot of premises before we get to the conclusion that naturalism doesn't have space for this special value. And I reject several of those premises, which is why I'm not feeling uncomfortable by the challenge that Bill's raising.
Well, let's turn the table, and now you'll...
Okay, so that was William Lane Craig asking Shelly Kagan questions. Now we're going to have William Lane Craig ask Hitchens questions, and then we're going to vote. Let's get rid of that, put that up.
Questions to Mr. Hitchens. Dr. Craig, your questions for Mr. Hitchens.
All right, let's talk first about whether there are any good arguments to think that atheism is true. Now, it seems to me that you're rather ambivalent here, that you say, you redefine atheism to mean a sort of atheism or non-theism.
That's what it means.
But how do you distinguish then the different varieties of non-theism? For example, what is normally called atheism, agnosticism, or the view of verificationists that the statement God exists is simply meaningless?
Well, I mean, there are different schools of atheism, as you say, but there's no claim I know how to make that says atheism is true, because atheism is the statement that a certain proposition isn't true. So I wish you'd get this bit right, because it's there you go again.
Well,
I just devoted a little time to this. I said it is not in itself a belief or a system. It simply says you can get by better, probably, we think, without the assumption that no one who wants you to worship a god has ever been able to come up with a good enough reason to make you do it.
Now, so the point is, though, that on your definition of atheism or non-theism, it really embodies a diversity of views, such as agnosticism, what is normally called atheism, or this verificationism. Now, which of those do you hold to within this umbrella of atheism? Are you an atheist who asserts the proposition God does not exist, or do you simply withhold belief in God in the way the agnostic does?
Right. On some days, I'm a great. No, I'm not going to do you that much of a favor. On some days, I'm a great admirer of Thomas Huxley, who had the great debate with Bishop Wilberforce in Oxford at the Natural History Museum about Darwinism in the mid 19th century, and who was known as Darwin's bulldog. We would now say Darwin's pit bull, and who completely trounced the good bishop. But I can't thank him for inventing the term agnostic. And I can't thank him for some of his social Darwinist positions either, some of which are rather
unattractive. I need an answer to this. My time is fleeting.
But because I think agnosticism is evasive. To me, yes, if you talk about the power of the Holy Spirit and so forth, to me, that is meaningless. It's to me, I'm sorry, I've tried. It's white noise. It's like saying there is only one God and Allah is his messenger. It's gibberish to me. There are many of us, I'm sorry, there are just many of us of whom this is the case. It may be true, it is true.
Okay, Mr. Hitchens, I got to press you here, again, because time is fleeting.
Feel free.
What is your view exactly?
Press away.
Do you affirm God does not exist, or do you simply withhold belief?
I think once I have said that I've never seen any persuasive evidence for the existence of something, and I've made real attempts to study the evidence presented and the arguments presented, that I will go as far as to say, have the nerve to say, that it does not therefore exist, except in the minds of its, except in the Henry Jamesian subjective sense that you say of it being so real to some people in their own minds that it counts as a force in the world. Yes.
Okay, so you do affirm then that God does not exist. Now, what I want to know, and do you have any justification for that?
I think I've come unwired in some horrible way.
You're fine.
Are you sure?
Do you have any arguments leading to the conclusion that God does not exist?
Well, I would rather. I think I'm wondering if I'm boring anybody now. I would rather say. I'd rather state it in reverse and say I find all the arguments in favor to be fallacious or unconvincing. And I'd have to add that though this isn't my reason for not believing in it, that I would be very depressed if it was true. But that's a quite different thing. I don't say of atheism that it's at all morally superior. That would be very risky. I wouldn't admit that it was at all morally inferior either, but we can at least be acquitted on the charge of wishful thinking.
I wonder if that's the case. Would you agree that the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence?
Well, I'm not sure that I would agree.
Okay. Let's turn to the moral argument and talk about that a little bit. I think you've misunderstood the moral argument.
Given the stakes, Doctor, given the stakes, you're not saying, we're not talking about unicorns or tooth fairies or leprechauns here. We're talking about an authority that would give other human beings the right to tell me what to do in the name of God. So for a claim like that, if there's no evidence for it, it seems to me not a small question.
No, it's certainly not a small question.
Because you're making a very, very, very large claim. Your evidence had better be absolutely magnificent, it seems to me. And it's the lack of magnificence, I think, that began to strike me first.
One final question, Doctor.
Okay, well, let's go to the moral argument. It seems to me there that you've misunderstood the argument in that we're looking for an objective foundation for the moral values and duties that we both, I think, want to affirm. It's not a matter of whether or not we can know what is right and wrong, or that we need God to tell us what is right and wrong. It's rather that we need to have some sort of an objective foundation for right and wrong. Wouldn't you agree on your view? It's simply the sociobiological spin-offs of the evolutionary process, and that therefore these do not provide any sort of objective foundation for moral values and duties.
That could be true, yes. That could well be true. Yeah, I don't want to be too much of a reductionist, but it's entirely possible that it is purely evolutionary and functional. One wants to think that there's a bit more to one's love for the fellow creature than that. But it doesn't add one iota of weight or moral gravity to the argument to say, but that's because I don't believe in a supernatural being. It's a non sequitur.
Mr. Hitchens, your questions for Dr. Craig.
Well.
Okay, so those were the two debates, Kagan and Hitchens. And now we're going to vote who you think is better, more persuasive. And we're going to separate by theist and atheist. We got more people in here now. Who did better? Who impacted more people in their persuasiveness and getting their points across, likability, all of those factors that you think are important. And so if you're an atheist, you can say Hitchens, or if you're an atheist, you can say Kagan. Either way, you're voting for an atheist. That bothers some theists. I got to vote for an atheist? Yeah, you do. Either way. Well, you don't have to, but you can refuse to vote. But there's no harm done in voting for an atheist. If you're a theist, Hitchens, you're not going to go to hell for just voting for an atheist. Trust me, I've talked to God. He told me. Theist, Kagan. Now, this is on the theist, Craig, asking these guys questions and their ability to answer. If you came late, we did on their ability to ask. Now we're doing on their ability to answer. Here we go. Any fool can ask questions. Actually, that's not true. It takes skill to ask good questions. But it's much tougher to answer questions. And by the way, after we're done voting, both theists and atheists can come on and ask me questions. Or we can talk about why you think Hitchens or Kagan did better. You can give your justifications. I'll give you my thoughts after the poll's done. After we get up to 100 votes. Oh, we're at 61 votes already. Oh, wow. Look at this. Looky what we have here. So far, it's the opposite. So far. And I don't want to sway the voting. Vote your conscience. But so far, it's tightening up a bit. Hitchens is better at asking questions than answering, and Kagan's outperforming Hitchens in answering questions than asking. So if Hitchens was still alive, and I'm sure Kagan's still alive, they would make a good tag team. Hitchens does the asking, Kagan does the answering. But it's a tight race. Oh, and even the theists are divided. On the previous poll, it was the theists saying Kagan was better at asking questions. And now it's tied. Interesting. Hitchens couldn't commit to his answers, says Jephthah. Yeah, good point, Gordon. I want to stay for the record here. And I'm not lying. This is objective truth. I am way better than Hitchens in both asking and answering questions. I am far better than Hitchens. You want to know why? Because Hitchens is dead. I'm not. I've used that same joke on Ravi Zacharias, so I'm being fair. I'm doing it with both atheists and theists. I'm actually better than Ravi Zacharias at everything now. Because he's dead. Is Ravi Zacharias in heaven or hell? Satan, where is he? Oh, no, we don't want to scare the theists away. Satan is not in the corner. He is not there. No, everything's fine. In fact, Jesus is sitting off to my left here. But he's camera shy. That's why you don't see any photos of him. Actually, there are a few photos of Jesus. And I'm not talking about the Shroud of Turin. I'm talking about his Roman mugshots. Okay, we're going to get to 100 votes. Come on. Only half of you, less than half of you voted. Who's better, Hitchens or Kagan in answering questions? From William Lane Craig. This is fascinating. The theists say Hitchens is better, and the atheists say Kagan is better. Wow. Jesus' skin color? On his mugshot? Oh. Well, you know, there's different shades. How do I explain? The best I can say is the mugshot I saw of Jesus, his skin color was very similar to Charles Barkley. And you know what Jesus said just before he was crucified? This is terrible. This is ridiculous. When they nailed the nails into his hands. This is terrible. Contrary to popular opinion, Jesus never said, Father, Father, why have you forsaken me? He said, Father, this is terrible. For those of you who don't know who Charles Barkley is, you're not. Why is Doug laughing? Charles Barkley always says terrible instead of terrible. Was there a Jesus? Well, I'm a Christ mythicist, Harry Hansen, but I'm a Jesus historicist. You want to change your vote to Kagan? You can change your. Oh, we're tied now. But this is okay. I better end the poll because I want about the same numbers. We were around 100 and low 100s. Okay. So, final results. Hitchens is just as good as Kagan at answering questions, but Hitchens is better than Kagan than asking questions in terms of effectiveness to the vast array of desperate audiences out there. And for the theists, Kagan was better at answering questions or asking questions. Yeah, Kagan for the theist was better at asking, but Hitchens is better than answering, so it was opposite. But there's still a fight going on between Hitchens and Kagan. It's close. Okay, I'm going to end the poll. I'm going to call it a tie, even though it's now 48-47 for Kagan. My opinion is that Hitchens is indeed better than Kagan at asking questions as far as being persuasive, but Kagan is better than Hitchens in answering them. And what did it for me was when Craig just point blank asked Hitchens, what does atheist mean to you? What type of atheist are you? Do you say you just lack a belief, or do you say there is no God? And Hitchens, he finally got around to it, but he could have just said, no, I say that the proposition there is no God is true. I believe there is no God. And then when Craig, rightly so, asked, well, where's your evidence for this? Hitchens is a mastermind. He's an expert in rhetoric, and this is what he should have done. Here I am giving Hitchens advice now that he's been dead for many, many years. He should have said, well, there's a ton of evidence for atheism. Here's the first one. If you read the Quran, you can find many prophecies that didn't come true, the contradictions, blah, 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 and then smirk at Craig because Craig's going to agree with that evidence. Well, we're not talking about the Muslim God. We're talking, okay. Well, there's a lot of evidence to believe Vishnu doesn't exist. I mean, if you look at the history of the writing of the Vedas, it's clearly a type of poetry, blah, blah. And then he'll look over at Craig and give a little smirk. We're not talking about Vishnu because all the evidence against these other gods, Craig will agree. And now if we're talking about some fuzzy, nebulous god with no clear definition that's unfalsifiable, no evidence is needed to not believe in it. And then you're done. Feel free to use this tactic with your friends and family at Thanksgiving and at Christmas. You're welcome. What else? Oh, in that part that where Hitchens, he starts talking about Huxley, and he it wasn't that long, but it was about 30 seconds of him saying stuff that's totally irrelevant and not needed to have said. And I'm not sure why he did that. But me, as an interviewer for many, many years, when I hear theists do that to me, it bothers me. Just answer the question. You don't need to go down a different trail. You don't need to tell me, oh, and by the way, did you know X and X and Y? I mean, just answer the question. But maybe you need that fluff. You need that filler sometimes. Because when I debated Trent Horn and he asked me questions, he asked, do you have any evidence for this? No. Do you have any evidence for that? No. And then I said, I've come here today presenting no publications, no citations, no whatever. I'm just giving you my thoughts. Just put all your cards on the table. Say, basically, have the attitude you have nothing to lose. Like, now in a debate format, it can have two effects. One, people who disagree with you can appreciate your honesty. And the other people just say, oh, he doesn't have any evidence. Case closed. Done. And then disregard the other points that I might make or Hitchens might make. Okay, I will open up the room. Atheists and theists can come in and tell me, if you're a theist, come in and tell me what type of atheist, what sort of things they do or say is persuasive to you. If you're an atheist, tell me what things you can do or say that you think is persuasive to the theist. And all you have to do is click the pinned link. Or maybe the easier way of asking this question is what not to do. And I think we have some science backing certain things up of what not to do. For example, calling your conversation partner or debate partner an idiot probably is not helpful. Even just saying you are wrong is probably not helpful. Not to persuade the opposite side. If you're just trying to get cheerleaders for your team, then it's helpful, I guess. It's weird that there can be many types of theists, but only one type of atheist. Good point, General Republic. But really, what is there? 2 types of atheists, really? That's it? How many types of theists are there? Woo! A lot. I'm agnostic in the fact that PineCreek has legs. I've never seen them. Well, Rick Henneveld, if you donate $100, I'll show you my legs. If you're good at something, never do it for free. Just a gigolo, and everywhere I go. Room's open. You can call in and talk about whatever you want, but preferably about debate tactics, Kagan, Hitchens. Only Christianity can take you to an empty tomb. Because, you know, everybody loves to see an empty tomb. I know the last time I went to an empty tomb, I walked in and I go, wow, look what I could do with all this space. See, David, you're a Christian, right? But what I just said there, made you laugh, and you're more likely to listen to me now. Can we crowdsource the leg fund, guys? Oh, no crowdsourcing. It has to be a single donor. I want like a sugar daddy donor. Would you do a video on your politics channel about global politics, like whether you support Israel or not? Sure, I could. So I would start the video and say, give an answer and then end the video. To me, like answering the question, do I support Israel or not? It's like answering the question, do you support Canada or not? Same question, really, for me. Sorry, Jews. Your nation's not special to me. I've been an atheist since 5th grade, got kicked out of 3 churches for asking too many questions. Now at 60 years old, I haven't got any good evidence of any God. Stopped waiting. Well, Martin, don't give up hope. We got a lot of apologists out there who are there for you. Like, apologetics has come a long way. I'm sure there's some apologists listening who would be more than happy to answer your questions. Feel free to call in. Don't be shy. Is a child born atheist or theist? I'm going to say atheist. But I do think humans are born with a propensity to assign agency to things. It doesn't necessarily have to be a god. I think I've seen that, Gomeo. I was raised as a diabolical atheist, but now I'm a Catholic. Oh, Shamus. You must have met a beautiful Catholic woman. Who's the funniest Christian you know, and why is it David Wood? No, he's not that funny. He gives me a chuckle once in a while. Jonathan Pritchett gives me a chuckle once in a while. But most Christians just take themselves far too seriously. You're fine with the idea of a creator God, but why worship it? Well, maybe a theist could call in and tell us. Probably because he's commanded it. And if you don't, there might be consequences you don't like. I've never had a satisfactory answer to why I can't just accept Jesus after I'm dead. Actually, Ryan, I have talked to some theists who will say that you can accept Christ after you're dead. They're the minority, but some theists or Christians will say that. In fact, don't even some Catholics say that? Kagan is greater than Hitchens. Well, if you saw the poll, Boris, it was a tie in answering questions, and Kagan lost to Hitchens in asking them, using William Lane Craig as the tool, as the control, I should say. Has Craig done anything recently? I think he still has his YouTube channel, but I think he's basically retired. Hitchens was better at making atheists. Many debaters are good at winning the debate against the opponent, not against the audience. I would agree with that, Boris. I think Hitchens has created more atheists than Kagan. If this life on the temporal visible plane is a proving ground for earning God's approval, it makes sense, doesn't it? Now that is an ironic comment. That is irony. The definition of irony. If this life on the temporal visible plane is a proving ground for earning God's approval, it makes sense, doesn't it? Yep. Perfect sense. Has Hitchens done anything recently? Sometimes my chat messages don't show up on stream. Let me go from top chat to live chat, see if that changes things. Let's make a rank of apologists. Yeah, we could do that. Yes, I saw that Justin's closing up shop. He's probably getting bored. How can we do this? Rank these Christian apologists. I think I'm only allowed 4 at a time, though. First 4, name 4 apologists in the live stream chat now. Yes, I'm a conservative atheist. I would say Hitchens would have been leaning conservative. Sean McDowell. What can I spell? I shouldn't say rank. Most effective. I'm just going to go to the first 4 I see. James White. Rhetoric Craig. Okay, vote. We'll do a new 4 after this. Most effective Christian apologists. And you define effective the way you want. We need at least 100 votes before we move on to the next 4. Actually, the winner moves on to the next round. So whoever wins this poll is, and then we'll add another 3. Should we try to define effective? Yeah, we probably should, right? Because you can view effective as effective to people who already believe or effective to people who don't. What's more interesting is to people who don't. Who's the most, out of these four, who's the most effective at persuading non-believers, non-Christians more specifically? And if you've already voted, you can vote twice to cancel out the first vote, and then, but maybe you'll have the same answer. So effectiveness is convincing, persuading non-believers, non-Christians. Not just cheerleading. Yeah, but it's who you're convincing and who you're persuading. Who cares if you increase the confidence of a Christian as a Christian apologist? Like, good for you. But isn't the real role here real job here is evangelism? One could say, well, by increasing the confidence of a Christian, they're less likely to leave. That's a good point. So maybe we should just leave it nebulous. Whatever you guys want to do. That's what I love about America. Free country. Sean McDowell's giving Craig a run for his money. Turek, you're doing something wrong. By the way people are voting, I think the way they are viewing effective as convincing non-believers, non-Christians, not just cheerleading for your own team. I think it's pretty obvious Turek is successful in making money, bringing in views and stuff. But is he really persuading people who don't believe? Turek, well, here's 71 votes that say otherwise and growing. And what's interesting about James White is I don't think he even cares because he's a Calvinist. His main concern is being obedient. And whether people become Christian or not, well, God's election or not. So from an atheistic point of view, if you want to be just left alone from theists, you would espouse more James Whites in the world. They'll just kind of, under their breath, think you're deceived, lying, doing what your nature has caused you to do, and they will basically ignore you. Unless you make them look silly, like I did with that one video. Then they'll respond. Personally, for me, Craig's never been effective. But it's because I have a bias against philosophers. I do appreciate his honesty. He's very honest about his anxieties and anxiousness about there being no eternal life. He's very vulnerable in letting people know that I will cry if there's no heaven or hell. I mean, I need it. Nothing has meaning if it doesn't last forever. He's very open and honest about that. But to me, that is repulsive neediness. Okay, so Craig moves on. Who is the most effective apologist? I got to copy and paste that. So Craig, so he moves on. The first three I see in the chat. If you've already typed it, type it again. I'm going to put in 3 more. But you can't be the same three. We already did Turek, Strobel, J. Warner Wallace. Cameron Batuzzi. Capturing Christianity. Those are just the first three I saw, okay? Who's the most effective apologist? Hang on. We had Turek. Who did we have in the first round? Turek. Craig. Who were the other two? Oh, Sean McDowell. And who's the other one? The most effective for other apologists? No. Most effective, I think you should vote based on most effective of changing people who are not Christians. Oh, wait. Thank you, Matesh. Because we don't want to use them twice. Wow, Craig's not having any competition on this one. Okay. Last place was Cameron Bertuzzi of Capturing Christianity. Sorry, Cameron. But the most of the people voting are atheists. They have voted. I guess we'll give it a little more chance here. Let's see if Capturing Christianity can pass J. Warner Wallace. Who wants to call in? People are free to call in. Oh, Shamus? Shamus? No, it's still last place. Okay, and pull. Come on, let's give Craig some competition. Who's the most effective apologist for persuading non-believers? Craig. Ravi Zacharias. Give me 2 more names. Zacharias. Trent Horn. I saw Trent Horn just fly by. Trent Horn did a flyby. Mike Winger. Now, I know Ravi Zacharias is dead, but assuming he was still alive, or vote based on his living apologetic work. Darth Dawkins. That's funny right there. You know what? Okay. I think Craig's going to win. Nobody's giving him a run for his money. So what we'll do after this, just for fun, and people can still call in, is who's the worst apologist? That's what we're going to do after this. Let's do the nasty thing. We don't always have to be... I know this channel is known for always being positive, always being optimistic. But let's just shake it up a bit. Next poll will be who's the worst. This one's who's the most effective. But the next poll... Who's... So whoever was in last place on the previous polls get an automatic buy into the next poll of who's the worst apologist, and then we'll add names. Okay, I don't think we need to go much longer on this one. Craig, you win. William Lane Craig wins, beats out a plethora of people. Yeah, I don't think Ravi Zacharias will catch up. Okay, now we're going to vote on... who is the least effective? Oh, did I spell effective wrong? It should be affective, right? Who's the least effective apologist? Is there a grammar? Like my mom, she learned me real good on grammar, but it's affective, right? You affect something. Or is it effective? Come on, someone help me. I don't want to look like a fool. It is effective? I was right the first time? You better not be lying to me, Mitesh. But you sound East Indian, so I'll believe you. Because East Indians are smart. Okay. Who's the least effective apologist? So the losers from the previous round automatically are in this first poll. Winger, Turek, and... Capturing Christianity. And the first one I see starting now has to be Christian, not Muslim, because this is all Christian right now. Yeah, I got the effective right. Who did I see earlier? Darth Dawkins. Is he an apologist, though? I guess so. Okay, here we go. Now, this is going to be a tight race, I predict. Well, maybe not. No, it's not tight at all. Hey, Mike Winger, if you watch this, you were, I know, a little depressed about just a few polls earlier. But look at this. You're the least not bad apologist out of these four. So far. Is it safe to say Darth Dawkins is going to win this no matter who I put up against him? Well, we'll give it a shot. We'll try to give Darth Dawkins a good run for his money. Oh yeah, I got some ideas. So, Darth Dawkins, congratulations. You won this in a landslide. Okay, here we go. I got some ideas to give Darth Dawkins a run for his money. Darth Dawkins from the previous round. Ken Ham. Now remember, when you vote, you're thinking about more people than yourself. So don't let your personal dislike of Darth Dawkins influence you. I mean, Ken Ham, Ray Comfort. And Matt Powell. You guys know who Matt Powell is? He's probably the least known of all of them. Here we go. Let's see if we can see if anybody can beat Darth. If you don't know who Matt Powell is, actually, if you don't know of any of these people, then just vote for someone that you think is the least effective that you do know. Whoa. Is Darth Dawkins going to be dethroned? It's a tight race. This is the closest poll we've had so far. Yeah, put David Koresh in here. Oh man, they're tied. Oh, Darth is squeaking out a victory, maybe. Darth, you're just too good. You're too good at being too bad. Yeah, Kirk Cameron could be in there too. Yeah, we got to give other people a chance. Okay, Darth Dawkins, you win. You're the best bad person, bad apologist. So let's give other people a chance here. So given that Darth is the champion, other than Darth Dawkins, Kirk Cameron, give me some names. Oh, Cliff Connectley. Yeah, you guys know who that is? Ask me anything. Connectley. Who else? Oh, Trinity Radio. David Koresh is not an apologist. It's a cult leader. Well, is there a difference? Oh, come on, Doug. Enough with that. Matt Slick, thank you. Got our fourth. Who's the least effective apologist of these four? I think I know who's going to win. Oh. Whoa. The second one is Cliff Connectley, I think is how it's pronounced. It's the YouTube channel is Ask Me Anything. What is it? I interviewed Stuart, the son. Cliff is the guy who goes on university campuses, and he always stands like this, like he's always leaning forwards. He's always on his front foot visually as a tactic. What do you guys got against Kirk Cameron? He's such a nice guy. Nice hair, nice teeth. Ask Cliff, thank you. That's what it's called. Who's Kirk Cameron? Yeah, if you don't know who these people are, just vote for someone you don't. Cliff is the worst. Well, looks like Kirk Cameron's the least effective apologist out of these four. Hey, Bryson Hunter, you should feel good about yourself. You're not as bad as Ask Cliff or Matt Slick. Okay, last poll. But it's going to be a different type. Which is more effective? Substance or rhetoric? Not to say you can't have both. And some rhetoric has substance, and some substance can have rhetoric, but if you one over there, your leanings. Now, I'm not talking about yourself, because everybody's ashamed to admit that they're influenced by rhetoric. I'm just talking about reality here. This is for the apologists listening. How they can change their strategies. I mean, apologists should pay me for this wealth of data they're collecting right now. Because they can watch this back and say, oh, this is what atheists think of this apologist, don't do that. Oh, this is what atheists think of this apologist, do that. You're welcome. To convert atheists into Christian substance. Good point, Boris. You know, Boris, aren't you the guy who always gives me grief on the other channel? You're always picking at me like I got a scab on my back and you pick. Maybe it's not you. Maybe I'm thinking of a different Boris. One of my favorite aunties was named Boris. Auntie Boris. Looks like it's close. Rhetoric took this early lead, but substance has made its move. Okay, looks like substance wins. Atheists, mostly atheists in here, voted that substance is more effective than rhetoric. Okay, actually, I said that was the last poll, but I'm an atheist, so I lied. Fill the stereotype, right? When it comes to substance, what is more effective? Very specific things or broad concepts? This poll interests me probably the most of all the polls I've done so far. So substance beat rhetoric, but when it comes to substance, what is more effective? Very specific things. Like an example would be when was Jesus born? Where was Jesus born? That sort of thing. Did the prophecy of Tyre come true? Very specific topics. Or is it more effective to talk about broad concepts like the problem of evil, divine hiddenness? Why did God create anything at all? I would even classify atonement theories as more broad topics. Why did Jesus have to die? That's a little more specific, but it's still pretty broad. Interesting. This is contradictory to me. Because you atheists out there voted for Craig, and he's a broad concept guy. You said Craig was the most effective. But notice Craig doesn't talk about specific things. He talks about broad concepts like foundations and grounding and like I view the kalam as more of a broad thing, not a specific thing. So you guys are confusing me now. You see what I'm saying? How you're confusing me? Do you understand why I'm confused? Now have I tainted the voting? Effective equals famous. Yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe they voted Craig as the most effective because he's the most famous. And Harmonica Luke even says that Craig's maybe he's not a substance guy, he's a rhetoric guy. But he's definitely not a rhetoric guy like Hitchens if he is a rhetoric guy. Boris, there you go again, agreeing with me. Okay, so those very specific things win. Which I take that to mean that on my channel, I should talk about contradictions in the Bible over the more likely questions like why did God create? Or would you believe if all you had was Paul's letters? Or would you believe in my flying man using the cumulative case? Okay, well, we got all those poll results locked in the video here. Okay, last chance to call in. I'll give you 5 minutes. No pressure. And if you're interesting, then I'll go on as long as it's interesting. If it's not interesting, I won't. You can come in and talk whatever you want about. I voted based on the examples you gave. I like your broad approach better. Why did God create as a precise question? Yep. Oh yeah, you missed a lot of polls. Danny. Franklin. Oh, I got you on that question in the live stream chat, remember?
Refresh my memory.
You said something like you think agnosticism is more honest than atheism. And then I asked you, is agnosticism more honest than theism?
It was a good. Well, did you see my response?
No, I didn't. And because there's so many of them.
Yeah. No, yeah, obviously. I did respond to that. Did I just lose my camera? Oh well. My camera's very finicky. I just moved a wire.
Same way. Your camera's like your faith, right?
Yeah, I think that's where you were. Well, no, maybe it's not. I did like that response, and I think I understood what you were getting at, because you were basically saying that the idea, well, I think because you've dealt with Christians that were sort of dishonest in regards to whether, I think some Christians come off as they have this ironclad faith, when I think that's sort of dishonest. I mean, I don't do that myself. I think it's disingenuous to do that. I think it makes more sense, and I think you'll resonate more with any person, even an atheist, if you speak about your doubts. I think that makes more sense. So
your faith isn't ironclad. It's more what, helium clad or mercury clad.
No, I mean, I think anybody who says they don't doubt is sort of dealing in some sort of delusion. Like, I don't know how you could be in a world where you can't possibly know everything, but still
careful, Franklin. You just called every Calvinist out there delusional.
Well, you know how I feel about Calvinism, so it makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. Did you agree with the poll results? Craig's the best?
No, actually, I thought Turek was my vote. So I was very much in the minority.
You think Turek is more effective than Craig?
Craig comes off as arrogant to me, and I don't.
Really?
I also voted for Rhetoric, so not that I feel Rhetoric is the most powerful, or it's difficult. It's a difficult question, but Rhetoric is instantly powerful. It's in other words, if I'm dealing with somebody in communication, you can deal with somebody who doesn't necessarily have the greatest argument, but if they're very good at rhetoric, it may take you a while to figure that out. So I think that's so rhetoric is very powerful. So that's why, and I feel like I forget where I was heading on that.
I think many atheists, I'll speak for them, view Turek in a more negative light than Craig, because Turek seems like he's just pandering to people who already believe. He repeats himself, the same arguments over and over again. Well, I guess you could say that of Craig. But on Twitter, it's like, I don't even look at anything Turek says on Twitter or on his channel anymore. It's just, the only time I see Craig nowadays, Turek, I mean, is here.
Hey, man! This makes sense!
Yeah.
And in fairness, there's some I don't have as much familiarity with, so I mean, it's a matter of preference. I also think the question about whether or not an apologist, what's the primary goal of an apologist? Is it to win the loss? I think that's probably that's true, but I think maybe you minimize, and it isn't just strengthening the faith of those who already believe, but it's also creating many apologists. Remember, Jesus said, "Go and create disciples." So that's part of the mandate. So if an apologist does that, educating because my personal opinion is, you have a negative view of apologetics, generally speaking, and I think I understand why. I sort of do too. I think that's because of how it's how apologists come off as being I don't know, a showboat, or maybe a little bit more of a little too academic for me. I'd much rather see people come out. They're also very defensive, which I guess is in the nature of the word apologist, but I just hate that concept that we're very passive. And I think that when Craig went after Hitchens, I thought that part was very interesting, because he went aggressive and Hitchens failed to respond adequately because he didn't have a stance.
He did, but he eventually got there, but it just took him way. Like, I actually think I would have done way better than Hitchens on that one part.
Yeah, but I think it's the nature of atheists to evade that stance, because you guys, atheism is actually nothing. I mean, I get told that all the time when I speak with atheists. So it's pretty nebulous. So it makes it very easy to, like, what are you defending? As a Christian, as somebody who's trying to argue, you know, my stance over theirs, you know, it becomes a little bit of an annoyance when the argument becomes almost there is no stance. So it's like, well, why are we arguing?
Well, yeah, I think the stance is pretty specific, and depending what mood I'm in, I can take two options on how to deal with it. One, I can just admit there's no good reasons for atheism. I can say that and just concede. But then they'll ask, well, then why are you an atheist? And that opens up a great line of discussion. Or I can say, there's great evidence for atheism. And then they go, well, okay, give me some. And then I start talking about all the religions they agree with me as wrong. And that's a great rhetorical tactic to use, because it puts the atheist and the believer on the same team, at least temporarily. I've done this with precept Calvinists a lot. But I just ran a poll here, Franklin. From the atheist point of view, apologetics is for A, the non-believer, evangelism, or B, the believer, to build confidence. And it's overwhelming that from the atheist perspective, apologetics is not for us. It's for you guys.
Yeah. I mean, I can see that point from the atheist side for sure. I think also part of that is atheists who are watching this program are used to dealing with apologists, so they have a defense mechanism up. So it's almost like, I'm not your audience. You know, I've been there, done that kind of thing. So I think there's that aspect of it too.
Yeah.
So I think in regards to what you said, what I can't remember how you phrased it, but what was the way, what works best for atheists? For me, my advice to atheists is probably just keep doing what you're doing, which is be very confident and keep talking about science, because that works. That's what gets me at first to think, oh, I must be in the wrong. And then I start looking into it and I come to a different conclusion than you guys do. But that is staggering at first, because you think you guys have all the answers. Like, oh, I'm just the faithful guy and you guys are the ones that have the actual evidence that I don't have.
Like when you say go to the science or stick to the science, what exactly do you mean? Like bring up scientific papers or evolution? Is there certain topics or certain things in science you're talking about?
No, I think that's actually, if you go to that, I think that's when atheism can get in trouble. I think if you go to using science as a rhetorical weapon, in other words, you just say, you know, this is where it comes to scientific consensus, right? Because you're not actually dealing with the science, what was found. You're just saying majority of smart people, you know, to sort of cut to the chase, the majority of smart people believe this. You want to be like smart people. You don't want to be like dumb people. So rhetorically speaking, it's very powerful. Nobody wants to be dumb. Even the dumb people don't want to be dumb.
Yeah.
So,
although dumb people are happier than smart people, so maybe we should want to be dumb.
I think that's probably true. Actually.
Oh, it's definitely true. Down syndrome kids are the happiest people on the planet.
Yeah, well, maybe there's something to that. I don't know. Ignorance is bliss. That is a truism.
Like I think when it comes to science, the most effective is the Enlightenment. It's the fact that we've explained so many things, we as humanity, like 2,000 years ago, people convulsing, it was a demon. Now we know about epilepsy.
Yeah.
You know, volcanoes, lightning. You go back far enough, everything was attributed to gods. or some type of spiritual realm. Now we know about electricity and so forth. And so I think that is what that stark contrast between what a Christian, when they're walking down the street today in the United States of America, contrast that to how life was in the first century in the Palestine area. It's such a stark contrast. And then you can just ask, really, you believe what you read here? And that's why I think Hitchens is more powerful than Craig, because you really believe that there's a guy and then a spirit came out of him and went into pigs, and these pigs went over a cliff. Like, if a Christian just steps back and thinks about it and their everyday experience here in the United States, it's nuts. The things that you read in the New Testament is absolutely nuts.
I guess that's
nothing
where,
like here.
Well, what you just said is powerful, but and I see it as that, but I also see it as it that way rhetorically. So epilepsy. Let's take epilepsy to get into the nuts or the weeds. Let's do what you do, like you've done this before. Take a time machine and go back.
Mm-hmm.
If, let's say, theoretically, there was a situation in which this guy, Jesus of Nazareth, claiming to be the Messiah, and there was an epileptic child or person, and he, forget whether or not he healed them, because that would be, I don't know how we would deal with that, but let's just say while they're convulsing, if you could bring 21st century equipment in, figure out whether it's epilepsy, I think an atheist would say, aha, no demon. Whereas, see, it's a matter of perspective and presupposition. When you believe and are open to supernatural, it doesn't eliminate the natural. It just it coincides with supernatural. So I could see a demon and an epileptic. So in other words, I could see somebody having a demon and being positive for epilepsy, being an epileptic.
Would you say the demon caused the epilepsy, or just that they're both there at the same time? Okay.
I'm saying it's possible. I'm not saying I know for sure, right?
Well, anything's possible in the magical kingdom.
Well, just to say the same way an atheist says, I don't know, right? An atheist. I'm saying the same thing. I'm saying demonic. I don't know if it's demon possessed or not. I'm admitting that I think you can test something, and you can say this is the signs of what we now call epilepsy, but that doesn't necessarily say that it's not something else. Even in the medical, even if you stick in the natural realm, you can see how the medical world will see symptoms, and they'll say you have this, but it's actually just a symptom of something more broad, like something else physically caused that symptom. So it could be the same in supernatural realm as well.
But you can use induction, though, to say that it's more reasonable to think it's just a natural phenomenon. Like we've done this with so many things, like the lightning, the thunder, and the epilepsy. We've figured it out, how it works, how it's created, how it's done. The room left for spiritual explanations is shrinking every day. And why not just say, well, it could be spiritual or demon or whatever, but we don't really have a good reason to think so. Other than a man 2,000 years ago said so, or is recorded to have said so.
Yeah, I think that's, again, that goes to where the power of atheism lies, right? It's in the idea of the natural's the natural. Nobody argues about that. Like, right. I can't tell you there's no natural. So, I mean, we're arguing.
Unless you're like inspiring philosophy and you're not idealist. Well, there is no natural. Everything's in the mind of God. Everything's consciousness.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
Or whatever he says.
Yeah. But I guess that gets to the point of the argument, because that's what in my opinion, that's what makes being an atheist a little bit easier to argue from. We're the ones arguing the point, right? We're trying to argue our point, and that's why I think in the past, I'm not trying to bring it up again. That's why I go to evolution, because at least that's something where there's a disagreement in the physical realm that is attached to the paradigms that. And we can argue about whether it's true or not. That's why I want to get to more of an attacking apologetic, for lack of a better term, than a defending one, which is to say constantly defending.
Well, then you should
Jesus
become a
rising from the
Calvinist
dead.
precept. If you want to put atheists on their back foot, that's why they exist. These precepts is because they agree with you. Like, stop defending your beliefs, and you make the atheists defend theirs.
Well, I forget the guy's name because I'm not familiar with that guy as much as Hitchens, but that was the question that Craig posed to that other guy, Kagan.
Oh, Shelly Kagan, yeah.
Yeah, okay. And I didn't, so he was a determinist, which I look at to be the secular version of Calvinist. And I didn't think he did that great on that answer. And I think there was an inconsistency in his, he was saying that we should expect more from us humans as opposed to every other animal. And I think, well, when you're asked why, I don't feel like he did a good job. He certainly didn't argue an evolutionary stance at that point. He jettisoned that, and he argued more of a social compliance or a social.
I actually agree a little bit with you there. Like, this is going to sound so arrogant, but I actually think I could have done me or even T-Jump could have done a little bit better there. Like, there was one comment made that that animals, we don't apply morality to animals like within their own species because they don't reflect. Like, that's not a no-brainer. Like, some animals can reflect, I think, and so the terms morality can be applied to some animals other than our species. And maybe, like, if Craig were to ask me, well, is something really wrong? I would know what he means by that, and so I would say no. Not on your definition, but on my standard, yes. But you reject my standard, I reject yours. So now what? Like, you can just... but I'm the type of atheist that a lot of atheists would say I concede too much. Like, I just give the atheists what they want. And if... I could even say, yeah, we have no free will, and moral obligations is part of this illusion that we are programmed to do. I could bite the bullet. I could say this whole conversation could not have been any different. And we are as a tree growing a limb right now. And I could look Craig in the eyes and say, deal with it. Bite the bullet. And I guarantee you he would have no response to that other than an appeal to emotion, but that feels icky. Like, don't you want to be more than just a limb on a tree, right? That's the only thing he could really say against that.
One of the things that I think jumped out at me too when you were talking was this idea that they also say that the smartest animals play with their food. So it's interesting when you think about it that way. So why would the smartest animals, it's almost like the ones that know what they're doing, that they're actually killing an animal, tend to be they enjoy it for some reason. So I think there's something to be said there. I don't know what it means about.
You just insulted me because I don't think I play with my food. I gulp it down because I was a farm kid and you didn't have time to eat, so you just ate as fast as you could. So I guess I'm stupid because I don't play with my food. Oh, I play with my food here on this channel though, so you're right. Yeah, I am smart.
Yeah, I thought that's where you were going at first.
Yeah. Anyhow, good discussion. I'll let you go. Maybe some other people want to call in.
All right.
Take care.
See you later.
Hey, what do you guys think Craig would do if Kagan would have just bit the bullet and said, yeah, we're no different than a limb growing on a tree? Just see how he would react. Like, you would definitely lose the debate rhetorically or in the eyes of the listeners. Is like, I can't live this way. I mean, I want to be special, but philosophically, like argumentatively, like what do you do with that? That could be the truth, right? Seems unintuitive. Yeah, Chuck, I agree. But if one is making the argument that these intuitions of free will, of real love, the way Craig views it, is just all an illusion. That we are pre-programmed to have these illusions. I don't know what Craig would say. And whatever he would say is also pre-programmed. Sometimes I think just biting the bullet and seeing how they handle it would be entertaining. And like what Franklin said, like there's many theists who are deterministic. I'd say most Muslims are, or what are they? No, I take that back. At least some Muslims are. Definitely Calvinists. But whether we have the ability to have done otherwise in retrospect or not, to me, it's a interesting philosophical question, and I think it has more power for the theist. It has more consequence to the theist than an atheist like myself. It's obvious. Matt Delante is the best of all atheists ever, of all time, forever. Are you in real time here, free thinker, or are you catching up, watching some polls? We must kind of act if we have free will, though. Yeah, Chuck, that's kind of my point. See, the problem with determinism for the theist is this God who is free. I think very few theists would say God's determined, and who's created a system that will lead to the sin that he doesn't want and evil and suffering that you can argue he may or may not want. But he definitely doesn't want sin. I think most theists would be really, well, I guess some Calvinists would bite the bullet on that. But to me, that's more of a friction than an atheist or naturalist saying, yeah, we can't do otherwise. Categorical. So let's pretend that this whole live stream, this whole conversation could not exist in any world other than what it is now. Could not have been any different. I would just say, so what? You would say God is self-determined. That's like having your cake and eating it too, right? And actually, if you say God is self-determined, the question still can be asked, can God have done otherwise? Could God have not created the universe, this universe? Yeah, good point, Jephthah. You could say the universe is self-determined. But I think for guys like Craig, he needs it. There is a psychological need of this idea of libertarian free will, this idea of meaning only existing in its fullest form if things last forever, this idea of ultimate objective morality, that if it isn't those things, then morality is worthless. Like, I think this goes deep into his psyche. Yeah, if I'm around 10 minutes, you can hop in. I probably will be. And I think when it comes to questions of morality and punishments, rewards, justice, I think sometimes people use this determinism, free will thing as get out of jail free card, a way to just not talk about it. I've noticed this on my political channel when some theists call in. You can't really blame the African American community for the high percentage of fatherless homes because you're a determinist, Doug. I've heard that quite a bit. And I retort, yes, I can blame them because I've been determined to do so. Because pushes and pulls work. It has effects on people. When you make someone feel bad for their personal choices, whether they're free or not, it works. And I don't know for sure what I say, how it will affect people, but I know pretty confidently it does in some way. So all of us are like, you know, those domino chains. I'm a domino in there. Whenever I fall over, I affect another domino. Determinist has nothing to blame anyone for anything. I disagree. One could say, all praise, all blame, we've been determined to do. So, how dare anyone say you shouldn't blame people or praise people? Like, you can just go insane talking about this stuff after a while. By the way, most philosophers are insane or go insane. My girlfriend works with the criminally insane and they still need to be locked up. Yeah, we still, whether we blame people morally or praise people morally, we still have to do things. Because we know that when we let go of objects here on Earth, they fall downwards towards the ground. We know that if we don't let go, it stays. We know that when someone murders someone, we can look at them in the eyes and say, bad guy. You're a bad guy. We're going to lock you up now. We know that prevents other people from dying. And we know that by locking people up for a lifetime makes people think twice before doing certain things. It is a deterrence. Theist, you can call in, or atheist, doesn't matter. Most philosophers are atheists. That's true. What is it? 80%? But in the philosophy of religion, the real philosophy that counts, then it's the majority are theists. Surprise, surprise. Chuck is going on with his feel sorry for ism. Feel sorry. Not your fault. On my other channel, I ran a poll asking, has a doctor ever diagnosed you with a mental illness? Should I run that poll here now? Guess what the answer was? I had about close to 100 people on my live stream the other day on my political channel, and I pulled the question, have you been told by a doctor that you have a mental illness? For those of you who weren't there, guess what the answer was? What percentage of people on my other channels said that a doctor had told them they had a mental illness? Put your guess in the live stream chat if you were not there. If you were there, please don't spoil things. Of course, depression counts. It's a mental illness. Guess what the percentage was? First guess is 3%. The reason why I bring this up is for Chuck. I have a hypothesis that I would love to run an experiment on to see if we can conclude anything from it. My hypothesis is that if you've been told by a doctor you have a mental illness, you will be more likely to have this feel sorry for-ism in other people. You're going to be less likely to blame, you're going to be less likely to blame people. We got 40%, 30%, 25%, 11-8%. Always a funny guy. 35% guess. The correct answer was 25%. Should we do it here? Let's do it here. Have you ever been told by a doctor that you have a mental illness? This is anonymous, so don't be scared. No, I didn't say feeling sorry for others is a mental illness. Did not say that. I said there's a correlation. My hypothesis is that there's a correlation to people having mental illness and feeling sorry for other people. That, in other words, that they're more compassionate in a way. That's a compliment. Yeah, I'm keeping it general, just doctor. No, I didn't say what type of doctor. But it's safe to assume I'm not saying a witch doctor. Yeah, my Wiccan witch doctor told me I had a mental illness. I didn't believe him. HIPAA laws? What do you mean, Chen? Am I doing something wrong? This is all anonymous. I don't know your name when you vote. I just know your social security number, your mother's maiden name, and the name of your first pet. That's all I know when you vote. Good point, Royal Wolf. Psychopaths is a mental illness. They don't feel sorry for people. So that would go against my hypothesis. Well, the thing, Rosemary, is when a doctor, for so many people, when a doctor tells you something, what you have, most people believe it. even though they might have not been formally diagnosed. Is that what you're getting at, Rosemary? I wish more people could act like me, but not be sad like me. Yeah, Chuck, I'll be very honest with you, Chuck. Like, when I read some of your comments, I think exactly what you just said here. I think you're a sad guy. And this is why you say some of the things you say. Is religion a mental illness? Asked Paul. Well, we're not going to, like, I don't think there's probably very few doctors who would say, are you a Christian? Yes. Okay, you have a mental illness. Doug is evil. Well, Sean Kelly, if you're a naturalist, I'm not really evil. I'm not ultimately evil. So, there's that. You know what's interesting is if we were to take this poll about 50 years ago, imagine all of us could live our lives 50 years prior to what we've lived. Take this poll. Maybe, to be safe, let's go 100 years. These numbers would be way different. Back then, we hid our feelings. We hid our mental illness. Because we were scared of going to the clinic and being zapped in the brain by electrodes. Yeah, it's not my fault I'm evil. So the number is higher here than on my political channel, which makes sense, actually. I'm not going to tell you why it makes sense to me. Because I'll put my cards on the table. I think fewer people come to my political channel who have been diagnosed with a mental illness. Because my political channel, I think for some people, is harder to watch for them. In fact, I think some people just want me to beat up on religion, and they enjoy that because religion has hurt them, and they want payback. But anything that pushes against what they might believe now causes too much cognitive dissonance, and so they avoid my political channel. So these numbers are actually making sense to me. Now, of course, there could just be interest reasons like, oh, I'm not interested in politics. But conservatives are less likely to seek out mental health, says himself. Yeah, Chuck admits what I just said. I do avoid it. It riles me up. It makes me very sad. Yeah. Thank you for admitting that, Chuck. But I'm going to encourage you. It doesn't have to be my channel, of course, but I encourage you to learn how to put yourself in situations where you strongly disagree with people, and you're more dead inside. See, even that language, like, what was the poll results? 36% said yes. I could predict with a high level of accuracy that the phrase "be more dead inside" really doesn't sit well with this 36%, but the 63% is more okay with it. Except for the psychopaths. That's one exception. That's one mental illness I can really get behind. Nonviolent psychopaths. And some autistic people. I'm not autistic, but I really appreciate autistic people sometimes. Because it's like what you see is what you get. I like that. And I like nonviolent psychopaths. Because it's very much similar to what you see is what you get. And on things that don't pertain to them, like on things they don't care about, well, they don't care about much, but if it's not involving them, they can really objectively see outsider issues well. Like if they have no reason to lie, if it doesn't benefit them in any way, a psychopath can take evidence and handle it way better than us normal people. That's my claim. Are you coming, freed thinker? Dead inside is just indifferent. Yeah, Mitesh. Be more indifferent. In other words, imagine someone says something that you strongly disagree with and you think it's very consequential and very impactful. Those are the hardest times to just say, okay, don't care. And then look at the evidence for and against. I was on a live stream the other day with Jefferson Spatchbach. Is that his name? And we were talking about rationality rules and his outrage against Dennis Prager. There was a clear example of two people agreeing on the evidence and coming to different conclusions. And I looked at the evidence and said, yeah, this is bad, but it's not that bad. I mean, the crux of what Dennis Prager was saying was true, but he just missourced everything. And yes, he made it misleading by copying and pasting, and he probably wasn't him. It was probably one of his interns who did it. Yeah, bad? Not that bad. But for rationality rules, what Dennis Prager did is like, you could have sworn the Holocaust just happened. I mean, don't you dare tamper with my Bible, those scientific journals. Spatchcock. Yeah, that's a great name. I got to ask him where that name came from. Jefferson Spatchcock. Yeah, John Robinson, I think that's correct. Only 1% of psychopaths kill people. Is that low? But what about injure people? I think Spatchcock had a point that you were too emotional. Yeah, well, that's what he claimed, but then I asked him to play back the tape and show me where I'm emotional. I couldn't see it. But in my opinion, you could definitely see rationality rules get emotional. This is effing horrible. I mean, at least for like a minute or two there. To me, dead inside means to try to minimize bias and emotion and use science. Yes, Satan, that's what I mean as well. And this is part of the reason why I used where I just come out and tell people, I'm going to manipulate you, don't let me. I'm going to say things that will manipulate your emotions, don't let me. I'll come out and say these things, and basically it's like people can't do it. Like if I say I'm going to be an apologist for Dennis Prager, I'm going to be an apologist for Adolf Hitler. Like if people's automatic emotion is like, voot, 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 I mean, it's like, at that point, you can't really see the evidence objectively. In fact, that would be a great exercise. Being an apologist for somebody you hate. Hey, Tyler.
Hey, how are you?
Good, thanks.
Good.
Do you agree that's a good exercise to be an apologist for someone you hate?
To be I think I missed the comment while this was loading, so I'm not sure. To be an apologist for someone you hate?
Yeah, just in general. Like, I think it's a good mental exercise on how to lower your biases by. It's another way of saying steel manning, I guess, but like to a greater extent, where you just be an apologist. You defend someone who you strongly disagree with, and hate, and you basically defend not only who they are but what they're saying.
I mean, I don't know if I'd say go so far as to defend who they are, but yeah, I like the practice of like taking a Christian and an atheist and saying, okay, you have to debate, but you're debating for the opposite side and try to do the best that you possibly can.
Yeah. Maybe you don't want to defend who they are because you never know quite who they are.
Yeah. And it depends on what it is. I mean, there's some things you don't want to defend who they are about. So, but I find a lot of times that it's helpful to at least understand. You find a lot of positions aren't as crazy as you think they are once you actually have to kind of think about them and defend them and understand their axioms.
So God is self-determined, you say?
Yeah. So I think probably the language that we use about freedom isn't helpful. Because, for example, when we talk about compatibilism and incompatibilism, we're talking about, is being determined from without compatible with being free? Like are like prior conditions that determine your actions, is that compatible with being free or responsible? And when you're talking about like a concept like God, then like those just aren't the right categories to use. So I'm fine saying that God has it's hard because I'm fine saying basically that what people say libertarian freedom entails, like the self-determining ability, the categorical ability to do otherwise, that is kind of true about God. The problem is that that libertarianism, as defined, is an incompatibilist position. So if you're a libertarian, you think determinism is incompatible in principle with freedom, and I'm just going to say, well, I can affirm that those features of freedom of God without saying that determinism is in principle incompatible with freedom of any kind.
Okay, let's give some specific examples. So I ask you as a theist, could God have not created the universe? You would say?
Yeah. You
would say yes. Okay. Yeah. Now let's take it on Earth here. If I was to say we as a society should severely blame people who kill other people, who murder other people.
Right.
You would say lean yes?
Yeah.
Okay. You would, like, some people would say, well, we should lock them up so they don't do it again, but it's not like we can really blame them because they're determined.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm a compatibilist, so I think that determinism is entirely compatible with our being free and responsible for our actions, right? So I have no problem with saying that someone is determined and blameworthy, as long as it follows. I broadly go along with something like a Fisher and Robinson model of moderate reasons responsiveness and guidance control, and so as long as there's proper conditions that are met, right? So we're not going to say, like, this is where the categorical and the conditional ability come into play. So if I may not need the categorical ability to do exact opposite of what I do, but I need to have I seemingly need to have the conditional ability that I could have done different if I wanted to.
But then, but could you have wanted to differently?
Yeah, had conditions been different, right? So you can kind of keep going down the conditional bunny trail.
Yeah.
Right. So had conditions been different, I could have wanted to.
But yeah, and so where do you stop with that bunny trail? Like, could the conditions have been different?
Yeah. So I don't think, I'm not a necessitarian, so I don't think that this world is every feature or fact of the world is a necessary condition. I think that you know, there's all kinds of conditionals and counterfactuals that could have been.
So what changes those conditions?
What do you mean? What changes? Well, what changes them, like from being counterfactual to being actual?
No. I mean, like, let's take an example of like a lineup of dominoes, cause and effect, cause and effect, cause and effect. You're saying that if you line up all the dominoes, and I push the first domino, it could actually go in a different direction than the direction it went?
No. So in the actual sequence of events, it would go the way that it went. The problem with the dominoes analogy is that dominoes are entirely mechanistic, right? They don't follow things like reason responsiveness, guidance control, agency, right? So there's too many substantive differences between it. It would be like, and I've said this before, if the incompatibilist wants to use dominoes as an example for how choices are made under determinism, then, you know, random, you know, particles spinning off in a gas chamber indeterminately is a good example for how libertarian freedom, you know, does choices, right? Well, they're just going to say, well, no, there's too many substantive differences. That's not analogous. And I'm going to say, okay, well, the same holds for dominoes.
So what would you say is that non-mechanistic thing that causes this freedom?
That I have agency, that I'm in proper control. I have a certain type of guidance control over my actions.
But what does that exactly mean? Like, to have agency, like you still, your brain is made up of atoms and it has neurons and chemical, electrical, like what?
Yeah, but there's intentionality, right? There's directness to it. So it's not simply part of this is I'm also not a materialist. So there's
a soul?
I'm not sure I believe in a soul, though. So I'm somewhat of it's a mystery, right? And I was this way as a Christian too. I wasn't a materialist, but I wasn't a substance dualist either. Right? It's kind of a hylomorphic view.
But hang on, Tyler. If you're saying that this agency is sort of a mystery, or what causes it, or how it works, you're really saying free will is a mystery.
Well, I am somewhat of a free will skeptic, right? So I'm a compatibilist because I think incompatibilism is false, right? I think it's demonstrably false. So I'm a compatibilist. Now, what that then means, like how you hash it out, right? I don't think we have all the answers to, right? So if someone says, okay, you know, what are all the sufficient conditions for freedom? I'm going to say, I don't know, right? But I know what some of the necessary conditions are, and I think we can know that incompatibilism is false, for lots of different reasons, because it requires certain categorical abilities and leeway conditions that I think we can just come up with plenty of counterexamples where we have the intuition that we're free, but those conditions aren't met.
So how would you answer, let's say I was to take the position that this agency you speak of is just like the dominoes, except more complicated, and that there's nothing non-material about it. I basically bite the bullet and say things like, this conversation would have happened no matter what, exactly the same way. Nothing's going to be different than what's going to happen, but I'm not aware of it. I don't, I can't predict the future. What would you? I'm basically biting the bullet. Well, like
on hard determinism. You're biting the bullet on necessitarianism. Basically.
Yeah, like what would you or a theist like Craig say to that?
Well, Craig's an incompatibilist. Craig's a libertarian. So I mean, he would go and just basically say, well, no, I mean, actually, this is part of my critique of Molinism, is I think actually when you press Molinism to a certain degree, it just becomes incoherent because it seems to start with the assumption of libertarianism, but it ends with the outcome that the actual sequence is entirely determined.
Right, I agree with that.
Yeah. So I'm not sure I could try to steelman Craig's answer. I think he would say, well, it would have been different, had that been in the feasible world, in the world that God wanted to create, had that been what you would have chosen in that specific context, then it could have been different. And I'm just gonna say, well, in the actual sequence of events, I don't know how it could have been different given Molinism. Right. So for my answer, I would say, well, I mean, it could have been different had you wanted it to be different. Right. All I need is that minimal conditional. And when we do conditional analyses, I mean, that's.
But what evidence would you have given? Like, if I make the claim that no, it can't be different, and even the conditions prior can't be different, and if you disagree with that, what would be your arguments against it?
Yeah, I'm not sure, to be honest. If I'm being frank, I think that without falling too hard on the sword of intuition, right? I'm just going to say, well, I mean, there is a certain almost proper basicality that we do have some type of substantive freedom.
Right. It's the same answer for objective morality, right? It just feels like it exists. It just feels like we're free.
I'm not, well, I mean, it depends on what you mean by feels, right? I mean, I think I would mean something a little bit more robust, more like a philosophical seemings or some type of intuition, or, it does seem coherent that in order for us to be blameworthy or responsible, because inversely we make these assumptions, right? We make the assumptions even in our own context that if people don't have certain types of control or certain types of agency or certain types of self-determination, then even we don't hold them responsible, right? So even in our own kind of minimal context, it seems that there are some type of agentival sourcehood types of conditions that minimally have to be present to be blameworthy and responsible. And so at the end of the day, I'm going to say, well, I think there is kind of a proper basicality to that. We at least sometimes are responsible and blameworthy. Well,
Yeah.
if that's the case, then it just follows that there has to be some kind, at least some, maybe not for all of our choices, but there has to be some kind of sourcehood, some type of this agency that's present for us to even have that kind of minimal basicality to our responsibility.
Yeah, like what would you say if I just replied something like that these are all illusions, that we still blame people and hold them morally responsible, even though they couldn't have done otherwise. They had to do exactly what they did, but because we're not omniscient, we feel that we need to say, and we do say it because we have no choice to not say it, to blame people, to praise people. This affects them, and it changes behavior because we can look back and see that blaming people and praising people does have an effect, and we are the cause of these effects.
Yeah, I'm not sure how I'd answer, right? I'm not exactly sure, because for me it's like, well, your question is effectively, how do you answer kind of a free will solipsist? And I'm not sure how to answer. Like I don't think we can escape a hard problem of solipsism kind of metaphysically. I don't think we can prove we're not in the Matrix. I don't think we can prove we're not a butterfly dreaming. I don't think we can prove that our intuition on this is absolutely 100%
Right.
certain that
Yeah.
we have it. Right?
But
So
it doesn't matter after a
certain
certain point, right? It becomes a so what type of thought experiment or question.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, there's a certain sense where it's kind of like for the solipsist, I'm going to say, okay, well, you want to say you live in the Matrix, it doesn't really matter. So we're standing on a train track, kind of the Lockean type. You're standing on a train track, and you see the train coming, you hear the train, you can smell the smoke, you feel the vibrations, right? All of your senses are telling the train is coming, and if you don't move, the train's going to hit you, right? Like, put your solipsism into practice. No one's going to do that, right? So I'm going to say, okay, well, I mean, for this kind of free will solipsism, all right, let's put it to the test. Like, you want to say that this intuition is just an illusion, right? We don't actually have responsibility, all that kind of stuff. Okay, well, like, do life without effectively nihilistic imperialism of justice. Right?
Oh yeah, no, but I guess what I'm saying is that this idea of responsibility is like just defined differently. It's in the pulling yourself out of the universe, having a God's eye view. We're basically like those dominoes, but when it comes to the practicality, we live our lives like we're free. We live our lives that we can do differently, even though maybe we can't. We live our lives like we should praise and blame, but really, even that was determined.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, I would just say, well, you may just have some type of like cognitive dissonance there, right? So you may say, well, like I think someone could be like a solipsist agnostic, right? They could be like, okay, well, we can't prove that our intuitions are actual, but this is the only way we can live, so we're going to live this way, but we can't prove otherwise. That's different than the person who says, no, I am a necessitarian. It has to be this way. We could not in any sense do otherwise. These intuitions are just a fiction, but now we have to live that way. And now I'm going to say, okay, well, there does seemingly be kind of a, orthodoxy, orthopraxy kind of contradiction there, where you're saying one thing, but you're still saying we have to live entirely different, kind of knowing that this is a legal fiction, so to speak.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. You're saying there's a cognitive distance there between, let's say, a deeply held belief and how you live your life. But I would reply, like, one is very philosophical, not really practical, and the other is like more practical, boots on the ground. Like, there's many things in life where there are things that we believe, yet we do behave differently. Like, we view light, well, I'm a science guy, or used to be, and so we view light as a wave, but really it's a particle and a wave. And we don't think about the slit experiment every time we're looking at light, or we don't think of sound as, with the bouncing off the air. There's so many things we don't think about, and we still live our lives, is what I'm saying. And
yeah.
I think free will, determinism is one of those things that one could be a hard determinist and still basically live their life like a libertarian free will guy.
Well, maybe, right? So I think like the wave particle, right? That's I'm not sure that's analogous, right? Because that's saying, well, we know that it functions like a it looks like a wave, but it's a wave and a particle, and depends on all kinds of, right? So, but we just don't think about that. Like, it's not part of our conceptual framework, but we don't act any differently than, like, we don't act contrary to that, right? So that seems different than saying, I have a positive belief that we don't have freedom, but I'm going to act as if we do have freedom. Right? That seems to be a stronger tension than just, I know, for example, that the Earth orbits the sun, but I don't think about it when I see the sun moving across the sky.
Oh,
like,
yeah, here's a better example. I agree. My analogy was bad, but here's a better example. We live our lives like the Earth is flat, even though it's a sphere. Like, we don't consciously think, okay, I'm going downhill right now because the Earth is curving. I mean, when we're in a plane, we're actually following the curvature of the Earth, but we live our lives like the pilots when they fly it. It's like we're just flying parallel. Well, we are kind of way, but sort of like, you know what I mean, like a flat shape, not a curved shape. And so I think there's many things in life like that where the truth is a little bit different than how we actually do things.
I don't think we act as if the Earth is flat. I think we act as if we're walking straight. Right? I mean, I know that's a conceptual, right? But we don't.
No,
like,
but
we don't say.
If you were on a curve, if you were on a small ball, you would actually act differently. If you were on a smaller sphere, like, you would have to balance. You would have to, like, there's more things at play. But right now, we walk on this planet as if it were flat.
Well, it's relatively flat compared, for our, in our small geographic area, right? It's flat enough. right? So, but we don't say, well, we think that it's a sphere, but we're going to live as if it's flat, and so we're going to do all of our calculations for satellites and aeronautics and stuff as if it's flat.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of examples popping in my head. Like when you blow up a balloon, we act like that we're accomplishing something. That when we blow air into it, it's going into something that will contain the air, but actually it doesn't. And you can notice that when you put helium in the balloon after a couple of days, that the polymer, the plastic, actually has holes in it because the balloon's made of atoms, and atoms is a very tiny nucleus with electrons around it, and so the air molecules can actually escape between the nuclei. But we act as if this is a solid, and we're putting things inside a contained solid. But no, you're not.
Yeah.
And our eyesight, like we got blind spots in our eyes. We act like we can see everything, but really we cannot. Our brain reinterprets things and fills in the hole right behind the retina.
Yeah, I mean, I at that point I would say, well, we act as if we can interact with what we do see and how our brain interprets it, right? There still seems to be a proper relation to the objective fact. I mean, but I think you could probably find an example, right? So I don't want to say that there's no example of this, right? There's no valid example. But I would just go back and say, kind of like I would to the moral nihilist, and say there's a sense where I would say, okay, if you're comfortable saying that this person isn't actually guilty, right? Isn't actually blameworthy, but you're going to blame them anyways, and you're gonna. There's a kind of imperial, like a an FU imperialism to that.
Yeah, but what does actually mean, right? That's the real issue, because actually is in that word is contained these ideas of determinism or not, God or not.
Yeah, but imagine that again, I can only go by thought experiment, right? Imagine you didn't crime, right? You're innocent. You're not blameworthy for an action. And the gut, hey, we know you're innocent, but we're going to blame you anyways because what we want to do. There's going to be a certain. I think that person, well, there's no freedom. No one is actually responsible. They're responsible anyways. Or there's that same type of again, I know I know that this is like a type of intuition, but I think intuitions are good insofar as they go. I know this isn't like a slam dunk philosophical argument, but I'm saying, okay, I mean, there should be. I think any rational person would have some type of dis-ease with that type of tension.
Oh yeah, I understand, and we don't fine people for not doing anything wrong, and we shouldn't reward people for not doing anything right. By the way, the conservatives, the liberals like the first one but hate the second one.
Right.
You shouldn't fine people who haven't done anything wrong, but yeah, they're more than happy to give people rewards for something they haven't done. But you were breaking up quite a bit there, and I'm going to end the live stream soon, so I think we'll leave it there. It was a great talk.
Yeah.
I think we confused some of the children in the live stream, but that's okay.
Maybe.
Okay, take care.
Maybe.
See ya.
But, I would recommend for this topic, not to necessarily plug my own channel, but I'm actually plugging my friend Colton Carlson. He's been on my show a bunch of times, and we talk about this quite a bit. It's one of our favorite topics to discuss. So,
okay,
if you check out Colton Carlson, he's really articulate on this.
Okay, very good. Take care. Have a good day.
You too.
William Lane Craig would be proud of the conversation I had with Tyler there. Yeah, the FUB, good point. How does God change any of this, especially when you start looking at arguments of omniscience? Hey Doug, how do I play poker? Email me here and get a free account at pokernow.club. Pokernow.club. Email here. We're going to be starting poker in 2 hours 15 minutes. And you also have to have PayPal or Venmo. It's no rake, friendly home game. We can see each other, talk to each other. We use Zoom for that, and then software for playing the poker. We play both Omaha and Hold'em. 2 hours typically for a tournament, then 2 hours cash game. Autistic Berserker, I don't say that. That's part of being a YouTube creator. Spending too much time being misrepresented. Thanks for coming, guys. William Lane Craig was scheduled to come onto this broadcast, but we ran out of time.